welcome to Halloween Addicts Anonymous. I'm Sandy LaFleur, and I'm glad you decided to join me for this session. We're going to do this in a pre-recorded video as opposed to a Facebook Live, since I've had issues with the live stream going through Facebook. And so for this month, and who knows how much longer until I can get this all figured out, we're going to be doing pre-recorded videos. And actually, I think this is an advantage for you because there are so many artists, wonderful artists, that are doing online classes through Facebook and YouTube. And this way, you can join this class at your convenience. And so if there's a class that would normally be happening the same time as this one is happening, you can go ahead and go to that class and then come and watch this recorded video. Anyway, I think it'll be a great advantage for you, and I hope you enjoy it. Again, if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask, you're more than welcome to comment in the comment section, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And if all else fails, give me an email and I will answer your questions as soon as I can. Anyway, let's get started with this month's offering. And what we're going to be working on is called Werewolf Spit. Y'all wanted a werewolf, and so I don't do crazy, scary werewolves. And so this is what I came up with for you, and I'm so glad that so many of you have decided to paint it with me. So if you bought the pattern packet, then you got your prep instructions, and this is what your piece should look like when you get done with the prep instructions. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start working on this potion area that's inside our jar. All right, so we're going to dry brush some highlighting on the jar first. So you want to get out some warm white, and you also want to get out your favorite brush to dry brush with. Now I like to use the Langnickel short round sable, and if you've watched any of my videos or taken a class from me before, you heard all about these, and they're just my favorite brush to dry brush with. And so I'm going to be dry brushing the top rim here in the neck and above the potion with warm white. So load your brush up accordingly. It's dry, don't add any water to it. You want to be sure you have a dry brush, and I'm just going to dry brush some highlighting in these areas with warm white. Now you should have to scrub to get that paint off. If your paint's coming off and you're not scrubbing hard, then you probably have a little bit too much moisture in your brush. All right, so I did that little top rim, and I'm going to dry brush into the neck area and down into the upper part of the jar itself above the potion. And I need a little bit more paint. So however you like to dry brush, that's how I want you to do it. However you're most comfortable with. If you'd like to see how I like to dry brush, I have a video on my YouTube channel that addresses that. All right, I think that's good. So sometimes when I dry brush, I tell you to not wash your brush out. We're going to pick up another color and make a lighter value. But at this point in time, that's as light as we can go, is warm white. So you can go ahead and wash that brush out. Set it aside to dry so you can use it again next time. So now we want to get out a little bit of desert turquoise. And we're going to float some shading on our jar. So you want to get out your favorite brush to float with. And in case you're wondering what I'm dipping in over here, this is called Winsor Newton Acrylic Flow Improver, and it's something that I use every time I float. It just kind of helps the float blend better, last longer, and basically it's just you use it in place of your clear water. Where you would normally load your brush with clear water, you load with Winsor Newton Acrylic Flow Improver first in place of that clear water, and then everything else remains the same. Side load, blend it out, all of that stuff. So I'm going to come up here to the top of this jar, and I'm going to float some desert turquoise in either side. Now, if you like to mop out your floats, the flow improver is great for that, because it leaves the paint open a little longer than just a regular water float. And I'm going to go on this side and mop this out a little bit. I want to go right here under that top little rim. And I'm going to go down the sides of the jar and stop when I get to this, the goo that's inside, the green stuff. So blend your float out nice. And I'm just going to stop it right there. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set in the sides of this jar. And this float is actually going to go from here all the way around the jar. I want to go ahead and dry those last two floats that I just did. And what I'm going to do with this float is I'm going to set up the walls and the bottom of the jar. The bottle, whatever it is. I'll call it a jar. It's really a bottle. So side load float, just like you're going to do a regular float. But I'm going to put the color towards the inside of the piece. And I'm just going to float all the way around the jar or the bottle. And that's just setting up the wall of that bottle. When you get here, you've already kind of got an edge to go up against. So that makes it a little easier. And this goes all the way around, across the bottom, and up the other side. Do you ever have those days where your floating just doesn't want to go as smoothly as you'd like? I think I'm having one of those days. Okay, so all the way around on the home stretch now. course, it doesn't help that I have a ceiling fan on. It's probably drying everything out. But if I don't, and I try to sit with all these lights on, it gets pretty warm. Okay. Almost there. Cool. So there we have the inside of our bottle defined. So what we're going to do now is we are going to get out some Irish moss, some warm white, and we're going to kind of slip slap the color all over this green goo in the bottle. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit larger brush, a 3/4 inch flat. I'm going to pick up some Irish moss on this brush, and then I'm just going to pick up a little bit of warm white, and I'm just going to slip slap this color all over this green goo that's in the bottle. So when I get to the side edges, we want to just be a little more careful. We don't have to get it all the way down to the edge because we're going to do some floating over that. So as best you can, stay off the walls. It's really not that hard. We just want to give that goo a mottled look. Almost done. It doesn't take much. Okay, that's good. The part that looks the best, of course, is going to be covered up, because that's the way it always works. So now there are some bubbles on the piece. Some of them get covered up, and if you have this handy dandy little stencil that you can get from Cover Distributing, you can go ahead and stencil your bubbles on or paint them on with margarita. So we need to get out a little bit of margarita. And let's go ahead and dry this green part. And basically you can put these bubbles wherever you like. They don't have to go exactly where I put them on the pattern, okay? Just make sure they're not all the same size. Let me see if I can find, there's one stencil brush. And I'm going to start with the 3 that are up in the neck area here. I'm going to put a big one right at the line here. Okay, one. And we're going to go down a size or 2. Do another one. And I'll go down another size. And let's do another one. So see, these aren't perfectly where they are placed on the pattern. And then I'm going to do a couple over here. And they kind of blend in at first. But that's okay. We're going to highlight and shade them, of course. Let's do one down in this corner. And let's do a couple here. Do as many bubbles as you want. And then I probably should do one up here. If you want to practice and put some in the middle, that's fine too. But anyway, just give yourself a few bubbles using the stencil or painting them in with Margarita. Now your e-packet has lots of step-by-step photos too, so be sure to have that out to guide you along the way. So I'm just going to dry these little bubbles a little bit. And then what I want to do is I want to go in and I want to float a highlight on each bubble with warm white. So just a side load float of warm white. And just inside each bubble. It's going to make them stand out a little bit more. We're just going to do a little highlight of warm white. Already they stand out much better. All right, and I'm putting the highlight in towards the center. So on the bubbles that are on the right side, it's going to be on the left side, and the bubbles that are on the left side, it's going to be on the right side. But you can put it wherever you want. That's just my friendly suggestion. And I'm even going to go up here on these bubbles. Okay. Got those bubbles highlighted. They're looking better already. We're going to float some shading on each of those bubbles with black forest green. And we really want to blend this out a little bit. You don't want it to be just a line of black forest green. And the shading's just going to go opposite the highlight. Trying to keep the bubble round. I'm not usually very successful with that. All right, one side done. Let's go over here. And on this bubble that's just half showing, you can just go across the bottom of it. Maybe a little in the back. I'm going to mop that a little bit to soften it. Use the corner clean edge of my brush to get the excess off. Just a couple more. We're working so hard and some of them are going to get covered up. But it's good practice, right? So there's a shadow that we're going to line on the background next to the bubbles. And that's going to be done with a liner brush and some thinned Black Forest green if it's on a green background, and thinned desert turquoise if it's on the blue background. So just make a wash with your liner brush of Black Forest green. And we're kind of outlining just one side of the bubble, just to make it stand out a little bit more. I'm going to go to these guys. Just a nice little shadow. One more. All right, and then we are going to do desert turquoise thinned on those ones that are up here in the neck of the bottle. All right, and then each of those bubbles gets a brighter warm white highlight on it, and that's done with your liner brush. Just pick up straight warm white. You don't have to thin it down or anything. And in the highlighted side, you just want to add a little stroke, a little rectangle of warm white. Just a brighter highlight. All right, that's looking pretty good. So we are going to go back now, and we're going to float some desert turquoise on the bottle above the green potion. So just a nice soft float of desert turquoise. And I'm not going to go out onto the walls of the bottle. I'm going to keep it within the walls. So just above the potion, a nice float of desert turquoise. I'm going to float a highlight across the top of the potion with margarita. So we already have that out on our palette from our bubbles. So just crack it open and do a nice little highlight across the top of that potion. So we are going to float shading down the sides and across the bottom of the potion with Black Forest green. Now I'm going to use a larger brush in the front. Okay, I will just go with this 3/4 inch because I want this to be a nice wide soft float. So I'm going to go down the sides. Right next to that wall. when I get to these corners, I want to walk that color out around that corner a little bit. And I'm going to go across the bottom. Now I'm going to mop this and soften it a little bit. And we're going to come up the other side. Okay, and stop at that top edge. Let's mop and soften. All right, it's looking pretty good. We're going to float a warm white highlight just inside the edge of the bottle on the sides, the bottom, and the mouth. And this is just a regular side load float with warm white. And what I'm going to do is get a little closer here. I'm going to do this in the top here, the neck. I'm not going all the way to the edge. I'm staying off the edge, just a hair. Okay, I'm going to do that on both sides. And I'm also going to do that down the sides and across the bottom. And that's going to be on top of this blue shading that we did, but just a hair off the edge. So just a hair off the edge. You want to be able to still see that blue shading that you did. That just gives the idea that this is really a glass bottle without getting too technical. All right, I'm going to go across the bottom. Let me mop that out a little bit. Almost done with the bottle part of this. All right, just up the other side. And a little close to the edge there. Just a little bit farther. Can I make it on this float? I think so. Okay, cool. Now, because there's lavender on this piece, I want to kind of connect these two pieces together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to float a very well blended out float of lavender in the corners of the green potion in the bottle. So I'm going to go grab my lavender and we'll come back and do that. Okay, so you want to use a large brush. So I'm going back to my 3/4 and I'm just going to corner load it, but I'm going to keep it pretty wet because I don't want this to be real harsh. I want it to be more of a tint. So I'm just going to come in here and add the tint of lavender into the corners here. And I'm going to do it also up here in the top a little bit. And now the other corners. And all it's going to do is it's going to marry the two pieces together. All right, cool. So we have our little purple tints, lavender tints in the corners. So we can move on and we can work on our cork. The cork was based in milk chocolate. So what we're going to do is we are going to stipple texture on the cork with honey brown and desert sand, and then we're going to float some shading and add the little larger holes in our cork with burnt umber. So you're going to need to get out honey brown, desert sand, and burnt umber. All right, so you want to get out a brush that you like to stipple with. I use the Langnickel short round to stipple with also. So let me find one here. I have plenty. And so we're going to stipple some texture onto our cork with honey brown. Now, if you wanted to, you could tape off the neck of the jar so that you don't have to worry about it too much. It would help if I got honey brown out. And I might as well get out the desert sand while I'm at it. Desert sand was the color we used to base in his face and his ears. So I'm just going to go with honey brown first. And I'm basically going to stipple all over my cork. And then just wipe out your stipple brush. And then pick up some desert sand. And we'll stipple some lighter color. And this we're going to keep more to this center of the cork. Not so much going to the outside. All right, so we got some nice texture on there. So what we want to do now is we want to dry this so that we don't wipe any of our lovely stippling out. And then we want to get out some burnt umber. Don't need a lot. And we're going to float shading. And that's going to go on the two sides of the top and across the bottom of it. And then it's also going to go on all four sides of the very little piece that's inside the jar or bottle. I'll get it right by the end of the video, I swear. So I think I'm going to go across the bottom first. And then I'll go on that smaller part right underneath there. Okay, now I'm going to go down both sides. Or up both sides with burnt umber. And both sides of the little part. And across the bottom. Let's dry that real quick. And then we're going to go in and we're going to put some little holes or craters, pock marks, whatever, just those to put in those darker spots, those darker little openings that are sometimes in cork. And mostly that, well, it's going to go top and bottom, so wherever you can fit them in. And all they are just little C strokes of burnt umber here and there. No rhyme or reason to them. Wherever you want to put them is fine. Let's get a couple down here, even though they get lost in all our shading. All right, so we're going to call the cork done. Now what I want to do is I want to get out some shoreline, which was the color we based this in. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a wash, a very, very light wash of shoreline that's going to start from the rim, underneath the rim, all the way down over everything, just to give us the look of glass, okay? So I'm going to go grab my shoreline and we'll be back and do that wash. Okay, so we want to put that wash of shoreline over this lower part of the jar. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to use my large 3/4 inch flat brush and I'm going to thin down that shoreline a lot. I don't want it to be real heavy. And I'm just going to start right underneath this neck and I'm just going to kind of roughly and quickly add this wash of shoreline all over the jar, just to give it the idea that there's glass over that. All right, so once you get that done, you can take this part of your piece and set it aside to dry. So the next thing we're going to work on is, of course, the label. Now the label was based in warm white. This trim here is lavender. His face, the inside of his ears were desert sand, and the rest of him was milk chocolate. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get out some purple cow and a brush we like to dry brush with. And we're going to dry brush some highlighting on this purple border. So just all the way around this purple border, just scrub on some purple cow. Just to break it up so it's not just a plain old purple line. Oops, a little too much. So just a quick little run around that whole thing. And then you want to pick up some warm white and just dry brush a brighter highlight on that border. So it doesn't have to be a whole lot of white, just enough to make a little hint of a difference. All right. There we go. So the next thing we want to do is you want to get out some Diox purple. And we're going to float some shading on this border. Well, I need to shade that a little better. That's better. And the shading is going to go all along the inside edge of that border. So just a nice side load float of Diox purple. And I'm just going to go right next to the white center with this float all the way around. And you could probably get away without doing this and it would be just fine, but I think it just adds a little bit more to the border. And let's see. Shouldn't take too long. Can still hear a little thunder in the distance. Oh, hopefully our rain's not over already. We've been needing some. All right. It really does add quite a bit to the label with this little float of purple. Okay. So now we're going to float shading on this white background all the way around, right next to that Diox purple float that we just did, and we're going to do that with Shoreline, which was the color that the bottle was based in. So just a nice soft float of Shoreline all the way around. And just take your time. No deadline. My watch keeps making noises when I hit the desk. Just a nice, soft float of shoreline. This is also going to get floated all the way around the werewolf too. And it just gives the label a little bit more dimension. All right, now I'm going to go around the werewolf, color on the background. Let's see, let's start here. And just float around him. Just to pop him off that white background a little bit. Now I'm kind of avoiding the sides right now just because I just floated around that outside edge there. And I'm not too worried if I get color onto his fur because we have a lot of stuff that goes on top of it, so it's not going to really matter. Which makes it nice that you don't have to be super careful. All right, just a nice, might as well do this side of his ear while I'm at it. Quick little float of shoreline. All right. Now you're going to need your stencil brush again. So you want to make sure it's dry. And a piece of drywall joint tape. Now this is drywall joint tape. And I do sell it on my website if you don't have any. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use it as a stencil. I need some desert turquoise. Not a lot. And I'm just going to stencil these little dots on the background around the lettering and around the werewolf himself. So it just adds a little bit of interest to that background. If you get up into the letters, that's okay. And they don't have to be lined up. Definitely move that drywall joint tape around so it's facing different directions. Don't make them line up like little soldiers. Okay, almost done. Quick and easy. Adding some interest to that background. Maybe a little bit more right there. Okay, cool. I like that. Maybe a little bit right there. Yeah. All right. You can do as little or as much as you want. I'm going to go ahead and go over this lettering just to be consistent. All right. So drywall joint tape, I use this a lot too, like I use my Punchinello. But when it's smaller areas, I like to use this smaller stuff. And you can use it again and again. You can see all kinds of different colors on there. You know, Victorian blue, purple, green. It's really very pretty. But display of colors I have on there. So now we're going to go to work on his little face. So you should have the pattern on for his eyes, his nose, his mouth. And we are going to dry brush some highlighting on his face and inside his ears with warm white. So just a little touch of warm white inside those ears. And then I want to get on his face. And you can just go through where his eyes are going to be or avoid them. It's completely up to you. I'm just going to go through them. I might have to put the pattern back on, but it'll be okay. Okay, and I think I can still see that. Yep. I'm going to get out a chalk pencil and just reinforce my pattern on his face. And eyes. There, now I can see for sure where his face is. All right, little cutie. So he has some cheeks. And so we're going to dry brush his nice round cheeks with dragon fruit. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the dragon fruit and the lamp black so I can base in his eyes and his mouth. And I will be back. All right, so I'm going to give him a couple of really nice round cheeks by dry brushing some dragon fruit. There. And his cheeks basically sit right at the ends of his smile lines. And I make them pretty big in consideration, in relation to the size of his face. So some nice cheeks. I also want to take this dragon fruit and I want to float some of that color inside the ears. So I want to blend it out really well. I don't want it to be, you know, in your face pink. I want it to be nice and soft. So I'm going to, if I get it too light, I can always go back and float some more. But I want to keep it nice and soft. Just a tint inside those ears. Oh, he's looking good already. Now I'm going to float burnt umber shading on the face and on the ears. So you want to get out just a touch of burnt umber. If you can't get into yours. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to float the shading at the base of his ears and all the way around the inside of his face. So blend it out really well. You don't want it to be a real harsh brown float. So I'm going to just go around the inside of his face. And I'm going to go ahead and mop this out just to soften it. And then I'm going to go back onto his ears. I'm actually going to go on his ears right here next to the brown part and then across the bottom a little bit. But I don't want to wipe out that pink that's in there completely. So down this side next to the outside of the ear, and then a little bit across the bottom. But you can still see that pink tint in there, and that's what we want. So now you want to get out some lamp black. Okay, so lamp black and a liner brush. We're going to go ahead and paint in his eyes, his nose, and his mouth. And usually my eyes on my pieces are not exactly the same size, and they might not be lined up. These are pretty lined up. So I must have been in a weird mood when I painted this guy. You're just going to fill them in completely with lamp black. Let's do his nose. It is a nice oval. And then his mouth. And he's starting to look like a little werewolf. Kinda. And just fill his mouth in completely. I'll paint his teeth on top. Now I always like to add like little stirrups on the smile line, just to finish it off a little bit. Should have left well enough alone there. So I'm going to now come back with my liner brush and some thinned burnt umber. And I'm going to line a shadow above each eye, above the nose, and below the mouth. So some thinned burnt umber. I'm just going to start about halfway down the eye on the tip of my brush. As I come around the top, I flatten it out, and then I come back up onto the tip. So I'm just going to add a little shadow. It's kind of like its top eyelid. It helps to sink his eye into his face a little bit. So I did it above the eyes. I'm going to do the same thing above the nose. And then I'm going to go just on this fuller part of his mouth. So let's dry that real quick. Because what I want to do is I want to dry brush just a little bit of highlighting in each of those areas. So I'm just going to dry brush a little bit of warm white highlighting. Not a lot. Inside each eye, inside the nose, and inside the mouth. Okay? Easy peasy. we're going to take our flat brush and we're going to do a side load float of dragon fruit. And what I want to do is I want to put that color in the bottom of his nose. So I'm just going to float a little bit of dragon fruit in the bottom of the nose, just to add a tint of pink to it. So we're going to paint his little teeth in, and then line a highlight in the top of his nose, and that's with our liner brush and warm white. So you don't have to thin it down. You just want to give him a couple little pointy teeth. One coat will do. Now he looks like a werewolf. And then I also want to add a little highlight across the top of the nose. Now his eyes, we're going to get some Irish moss. You want to get out some Irish moss if you can't get into yours. And some margarita. So we are going to paint a little crescent-shaped stroke in the bottom of each eye with Irish moss. Okay, now this is the way I do most of my eyes. So if you're familiar with it, you don't have to listen. But I don't do an actual stroke itself. I like to line on the bottom edge, and that way I can keep it just a hair off of the very edge. Then I leave that little ring of black below this stroke. It doesn't have to be opaque. Just going to line that bottom edge. That way I can keep it above the very bottom, and then paint in the rest of the stroke. So he's got a couple of little green eyes. So just wipe the brush out, pick up a little margarita, and we're going to just line a highlight through the center of those green strokes, and that's just with straight margarita. Okay, now I want to give him a few little eyelashes. So with some thinned lamp black, I'm just going to squiggle on some eyelashes because I want mine to be a very cute little werewolf. So just a couple more little things and his face will be done. We want to add some highlights in his eyes. Just a couple of little set downs. Those are with warm white. And then he has a couple of eyebrows. And those are just painted on with thinned burnt umber. Okay. Oh, he's looking cute. I hope yours is coming out just as cute. He's got bushy little eyebrows there. Okay, we're going to work on his hair. And now I just did it all with a liner brush. So the first layer of hair we're going to put on, and you see the hair came off the edges, so it kind of blurred those hard edges that we painted on here. So you want to be aware of doing that. So the first layer we're going to stroke on is going to be with thinned burnt umber. And I'm just going to start right here at his widow's peak and start stroking on. And I also want to blur the lines around his face a little bit too. So I'm going to come off that edge a little bit and onto his face so that it wipes out those hard edges. But you just want to go through, and just like with any other line work you do, it'll go a lot faster and easier if you're staying as straight up and down on your brush as you can. You also want to stroke some of this on the ears, and again, get it off the edge of the ears a little bit. I also stroked a little bit on the outside edge of the ears to make them hairy too. And just kind of follow the shape of the head. And as you can see here, this is going up, and then it's going to come and curve around and down. And then what's under his chin is going to go down and out this way, if that makes sense. If you look at your picture, you can see that pretty well. He's looking much better already. So I'm going to go here. So just take your time. Think like hair. My husband is working outside. I apologize if you can hear the saws. He's always working on something. Okay, let's work on this side. I need to add some more water to my brush. It's probably going to be easier for me to go at it from this way. So this is just the base of his hair. We're going to come back and stroke some lighter hair on him. Okay. This is kind of like a little beard or goatee down here. You know, werewolf's hair just kind of grows in all directions. But don't hurry through this. That's a good base. So now I want to stroke on some lighter hair with thinned desert sand. And you don't want to line so much desert sand on that you lose the burnt umber behind it or the milk chocolate that you can still see. So you're not going to line as much. So I'm going to line some on his ears. And I'm kind of staying away from the very base of the ear because I want to keep that like a shadow part. I'm going to come up here and line some on this ear. Okay, and let's get some here at the top of his head. Okay, we're getting there. This is going to go much faster because you're not putting on as much and you already know the direction that your hair is going. So just a cute little werewolf, nothing scary about him. Kind of line those up a little bit. That's not good. So let's get his little goatee going here. And this crazy hair. I could have done this with a filbert rake brush, but I didn't want the hair to be fine, you know, thin and fine. I wanted it to be, look a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Coarse, I guess. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, if you wanted to, you could come back in and stroke some more, some milk chocolate back into it. If you think it got a little light, I think mine got a little light. So I am going to come back in with some thinned milk chocolate and just stroke a little bit of that base color back in there because I got a little carried away with the light. So I'm just going to add some of that red back in. And it makes a difference. Just adding that little bit of reddish brown back in. It doesn't take a lot, just to tone down that lighter hair. It's kind of like his highlights got a little too bright, so we're going to put a toner on them. And that's going to be nice. There we go. Yeah, that looks better. It was a little too bright. So now we're done with the werewolf. So the next thing we want to do is we want to do our lettering and some outlining on our border and some stitching. And we're going to do that with the thin side, the small side of our black Identi-Pen. So while I let my werewolf dry a little bit, I'm just going to go on this purple border and outline it just to define it even more. Obviously, it doesn't have to stay right on the line. Ideally, it should, but I obviously can't. So it's okay if it's a little crooked. So out, just line between the purple stripe and the inside label with your black Identi-Pen. You could also do it with your liner brush and thin lamp black. But I thought it would be easier with this. There's also just a little bit of, there's some stitching that you just add with your Identi-Pen, just because it needed something else. So add some quick stitching around this border. Obviously, this doesn't have to be straight either. I think anything I do doesn't have to be straight. If it does, I'm in trouble. Okay, almost done with the stitching. All right, cool. Now the lettering. Basically, I just take my Identi-Pen and line 3 or 4 little stripes to form each section of the letters, okay, just to add some more interest to them. And I do that on the small lettering too down here. So very easy. Doesn't have to be straight again. And at least you don't have to do it with a liner brush. And so it will go really quickly. Now the S's and O's take a little more concentration. And the P's and R's. Okay, quick and easy that lettering was. Get down here. Now these are smaller letters, so just a couple. It doesn't take a lot to fill those up fast. Okay. So this turned out to be actually a pretty quick piece, I think. So once you get that lettering on there, what we can do is get our other piece back. And you're just going to, when everything's dry, you just want to kind of center this on there, glue it in place. Don't forget to sign your piece. And then varnish it with a couple of coats of your favorite spray or brush on. I would use a spray. I always use a spray. And then if you have some ribbon, purple looks pretty good. Kind of ties in the border to the piece. You can tie raffia around it, whatever you'd like. But there you go. Werewolf Spit. Another presentation of Halloween Addicts Anonymous. And I guess I better get to working on next month's. Anyway, thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again.